an example, and this is the concern that's being brought forward by someone. I don't think that those are common enough settings that it is something that may be replicated elsewhere and may not be bubbling up any other way.
And maybe that's part of the inquiry process, is trying to figure out and triage that and figure out, is this happening elsewhere? And by virtue of, maybe back to the intake and who looks at that, by virtue of the coordinator being able to see what that complaint is, maybe that's the first line of evaluating it and just saying, okay, this is, and maybe it's as simple as bringing it to the chairs. I don't know. Do we go to the advisory committee at that point and say, we've received information about such? Does the advisory committee know of other situations like this across the state of North Dakota that they could speak to? And then again, if we now have 4 instances, 6 instances in all corners of the state, then maybe that's an area where we, instead of looking at an individual where we've got to deal with private data, private health information, and look at.
So you would be comfortable with the process being there is some sort of written report that goes to the chairs and that goes to, let's say, the advisory council to say, this is the situation that's been presented. Advisory council, are you aware of, through your contacts, additional information that might come in on this topic? And then that gets folded into the chair's determination. I also suggested like a rotating set of the membership to make sure that it doesn't always fall on the chairs, because I know that for the next 2 to 3 months, you will be kind of busy. All of us will be, but
you might be busy after that too.
Yeah.
What would we think about the coordinator doing the initial screening and doing like some background research on the issue for whatever content might be available and out there, and kind of provide some sort of summary, written or otherwise, to, I don't know, members of the council, whether that's the chairs or some other subset. And then if they give it a yay or nay, it could go to the next stop at advisory council. If they give it a yay, is this the systems issue, it goes to the full council.
And if I can add something too, I think that maybe one of the things with the coordinator is check and make sure that the person is exhausting appeals or filing complaints or whatever at the right place. Because the last thing I'd like to have, so let's say that somebody had a complaint against the Center for Independent Living. Well, we have a complaint procedure, and are they following that? Are they actually, and even if it's not, they don't like the examples, at least if they're following it, and we can get some releases of information. We can kind of process through that to find out, again, is this an individual just unhappy, or is this a real problem? And again, I'm not saying that those two things are mutually exclusive, but does that make sense what I'm saying? It's like this process through it a little bit.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
And make sure that people aren't wasting their time. What's that?
We as lawyers talk about it, exhausting your administrative remedies before you can even have an appeal.
Yeah.
That would make sense. That would take care of a few of these things. The other thing, we're a small state, and the privacy of the people involved. I mean, if you say we've got this situation, and I think you even said, Dan, everybody knew right away who it was when you're,
yeah,
or at least in that area, knew who the people were. So if you're bringing these private concerns to the advisory council, they can put it together pretty quickly, maybe, or at least in the regional area. And I worry about the privacy when you're making a complaint.
Yeah.
I like the language there. I mean, that's something we're comfortable with in terms of exhausting remedies before you.
One of the things that frustrates. Sorry, we're at a little bit of a delay, so every time I start, one of my frustrations is when you see people coming up and giving a passionate story about their struggles, but they're not telling the story at the right place, and that goes just. It's like if we could just start with the right place. So, and recognizing the fact that the more people have to tell their stories, the less likely they're going to continue to tell them.
And maybe we would even, depending on the situation, not subject anybody that we did want to do an interview with or whatever to the full council. Maybe that could be just the chairs or the subsect that's first doing the inquiries at that time, just like out of respect for people's privacy and maybe being more comfortable to share in like a personal setting, or to be able to join on like Zoom or something like that if they're that family that has 2 hours free every couple weeks in a car, you know, so that they don't have to come here and be questioned by the full council, because that can be a pretty scary thing sometimes with some of the questions that get asked.
Well, every corporation that has a board has, the board has an executive committee, and that executive committee makes decisions between board meetings, typically, I'm just saying. And we could organize it like that too, saying you run it by the chairs as the executive committee, or whoever else you want to put on that executive committee. Just to help strain through some of these things, so everything doesn't come to the commission.
Yeah, if it, if there's even an annual inquiry committee or executive committee or something along those lines where, I know my previous employer, we had, like, for whistleblower complaints, we had a committee that would be, that would handle those, because then you get people who are frustrated about anything, and so they file a complaint, and okay, this is really a whistleblower, but then every once in a while, it's like, okay, we need to actually look into this, but that was made separately, apart from the entire board, so that way that, could screen it out, like you mentioned, so that's not a bad idea. And whether, I would be supportive of something, I'm open to group ideas here, but if it's a subset of 3 of the committee members, or if it's the co-chairs and another member of the committee, and then, just having 2 of the 3 present would be something like a quorum, so that way you don't have to, it doesn't need to be unanimous, but it might be, at least a consensus to move forward. And then obviously, I think the coordinator would also have to be heavily involved in something like that too.
I feel like I'm volunteering somebody who's isn't in the room yet.
Well, and if we did it that way, which I think is fine, I think it would be important for the commission as a whole to keep in mind that Dan's idea of rotating members might be good, because sometimes you might, this isn't the case now, but in the future, who knows who's going to be on the commission. You could have somebody in a chairperson that is maybe not on board with what the Olmstead Commission is really about, or would just think everything should be denied and nothing should ever be explored. So I think the idea of rotating members to make sure that you kind of have like an unbiased group.
Or the alternative, that everything should be explored.
Exactly.
And next thing we're
Exactly.
chasing our tails too, so. It's a good idea.
Yeah, well, that could be appointed once or twice a year. This will be the 3-person committee for handling inquiries or something. As a screening committee.
Instead of inquiry, can we call it inquisition?
Like that
Sounds
not
so
fly with
scary. Both
everybody.
sound so scary.
We do want to welcome people in through the front
Can we call
door.
it the Bergam Inquisition?
I'll
See if you'd
put
like
together
that.
some
I'll
Can you
run
run
that
that
up
by?
and see, let me see.
No, don't, please.
Oh, he already said no.
Just thinking about our setup and trying to have consumers as involved as possible, thinking about that, it might be good to have a consumer or member that's on this commission that's have lived experience to do that. I think that would be a good idea,
Good idea. Absolutely.
just to keep it.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, because I think the whole reason we got the advisory council is because we want consumer representation that we don't currently have, and we thought this would be more doable than
Right.
trying to change the executive order.
Can I just ask how many there are? I wasn't sure, like on that advisory.
Siobhan,
No, sorry, I mean on that, consumer
Yeah, who is on
advisory,
that group?
excuse me.
Are they on the website?
those 4, no, it's not on the website yet.
Okay. Those 4.
I'll put it on my to-do list.
I was just
12
curious
though?
of how
Yeah.
many
Okay.
Siobhan's now are Olmstead consumer member. I, again, don't want to nominate people who aren't around, but
I mean, Ryan has the executive order pulled up. There are,
One of my 17 tabs here.
And you literally had it just pulled up.
Well, aren't they all agencies with the exception of 2 community members? And it just so happens Siobhan is also a consumer.
Okay,
Well, I mean, Teresa deliberately nominated Siobhan to fill, I mean,
But it's not like we have a slot for consumer on
two
there.
representatives of the public is large.
Yeah,
okay,
that's what I thought. So it's Wally and Siobhan, yeah.
okay, got it.
It was also,
Maybe that makeup wouldn't work,
Everyone else
but
is
just
an agency,
thinking,
right?
I like that idea of working with that advisory group.
it was interesting for what I was worth to your point earlier about the lack of teeth in the executive order. It just says it's an advisory and oversight role, but it doesn't say who even advises or the oversight that they give. Generally, there are a couple of references to the states, but I mean, even that in and of itself is a legislature, the governor, the judiciary, fill in the blank, you know, the agencies.
It's one of our goals or strategic plans is to report to the governor once a year. Say, here's kind of what we saw, you know, an overview.
Sure. When does that report?
We couldn't fire Dan because he wasn't there to, you know, for not submitting the report, so. That was a joke, Dan.
He seems really humored by it, Wally.
Seems super excited.
No, preferably by the end of the year, we were bringing it, something like that.
I'm getting back into the, you know, flow of writing fluffy language, so, excuse me, aspirational.
This is not what I want to hear.
Testimony,
You know,
testimony.
Dan might be.
Oh, okay, I was
position.
thinking about like your legal cases. I'm like, that shouldn't be fluffy.
Well, do we want to, I guess what's the next, do we want to try and come up with some language for an inquiry process and
Well,
bring that to the,
is there any set of ideas that people are relatively set on after this discussion? The initial screening by the coordinator, then in front of some subsection of the commission, rotating executive committee, or, I mean, do we want to narrow that down into a proposal to float out to everybody?
It'd be fun. I like Scott's idea of the, making sure during the screening that they've exhausted their administrative.
exhaust their remedies, that they, you know, that we can try and engage from their input a scope. Is this just an individual issue? Are there others that you're aware of that might be willing to talk to us? Are there,
You know, others that would naturally represent that party too. I mean, you know, I don't want to take legal work away from people who should be getting an attorney or an accountant
right.
or whatever. But if they are pointing to a larger systemic issue, that involves the areas that we're interested in. I mean, that we set out in our strategic planning.
and also knowing what their expectations are. Again, if they're expecting us to issue the $10,000 fine to someone, well, we might not be able to do that.
I also think an important like box that should be checked or question that should be asked is, would our assistance or would anything we could do to change their issue result in a substantial impact for that person or for a group of
Yeah.
people?
There you go. Yep.
I mean, if we're arguing over denial on the autism voucher for $200, like, I'm sure that could be important to that person, but we would waste more than $200 investing our resources and investigating and talking to people.
I think too, it's important on the, before it comes to the full commission, any sort of inquiry would have interaction with the advisory council as well. Because those would be individuals with lived experience that might be able to help form the scope of this issue.
As in, that person coming in should have direct contact, or the issue should be pushed out and ask for additional input, additional comments, concerns. Is there anybody with specific lived experience in this area?
Maybe an ask at this point. Part of me says maybe there's a way that part of that screening committee, that executive committee, could involve one of them. But then maybe it's more appropriate that it's just an ask as well to them and say, is anyone else aware of this? Because in that way, that maybe that's part of the task of the screening committee, the inquiry committee or executive committee.
I mean, I don't mind the concept of the advisory committee being involved in this, but is that something everybody's comfortable with?
You know, when I think about it, our job probably is to be a super advocate, and it just matters is there something that we can advocate on a very larger basis, whether it's the governor, the legislature, or the human service department. Does it fit any of those? And that's where you get other advocates. I mean, we need their support, and that's what you make the ask for. Does anybody else have this issue? Is this, we're looking for a class action?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
In some ways.
And how does this fulfill our responsibility under what we're supposed to be looking for with the settlement agreement? You know, and what happened today with this report that we dealt with is that it's really put us on notice of things that we need to be advocating for. If they're having reports filed and data brought in and nobody's doing anything about it, that's not the way we want to see things either.
Regardless of whether we take an inquiry or not, I would really like us to have an internal process for acknowledging that people submitted an inquiry. And so I don't know what that is. I mean, it can just be a simple form letter that we send to people and say, thank you for submitting your inquiry. We reviewed it. We appreciate your time. This does not fall under our parameters or whatever. I just feel like people at least need to be acknowledged that. I think people will get really turned off if they like submit an intake email or whatever we're talking and then just like disappears into cyberspace and they never hear from us. So I think it's the responsibility of the commission either way to respond to people and tell them we're taking it, we're not taking it. And if we do take it, then like, why don't we tell them what we've done? You know, I really did feel like we left the autism at LSTC issue unfinished. I mean, I know we did so much digging and information and that was great, but I still feel like the question at hand is why is there a disproportionate amount of kiddos with autism at LSTC? We got all this information, but it's not like we made a decision or a recommendation or anything. And I felt like we should have tied that up with a letter that said, you know, to that group, the ASD group, to LST saying, you know, this was our inquiry, this is what we found. This is an issue, this isn't an issue. These are recommendations to fix the issue. So I feel like as a commission, if we want to have respect within the greater community, that is an important part of letting people know what we're actually doing. And that's not against you, that's more of like us as a group not having our stuff quite figured out, you know?
We heard that today about the rejection letter that she received and how they didn't tell us why he rejected it. They left a very empty feeling for it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're right on with that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you know, some people might submit something once, and if they get rejected or never hear from us, then they probably never will again. But if we say, well, we didn't take this because of X, Y, Z, or we could even give them ideas, like you didn't exhaust your administrative processes, mm-hmm. Try these things, you know.
Yeah,
so
people are unaware of that too, sometimes.
Can I disrupt this process to say, hey, it sounds like there is something that this group would like to take action on at this meeting. Do we want to follow up on Veronica's indication of a letter to the ASD group with findings out or some sort of conclusion? do we feel comfortable that there was a conclusion to that?
Sorry, I'm probably putting you guys on the spot. I just thought we should let people know that we at least really tried to look at their issue and got information, and maybe it's not something the whole group agrees on. So I don't know if we could have recommendations or whatever, but we can at least say what we did and share our findings.
We could send that out to the commission and ask them to endorse it before sending it. I mean, because we don't have the ability to take an action to say, let's do that.
I mean, I definitely do have a
by
complaint
email getting
on
a vote.
How many do we need?
Oh, we do.
We have 6 of 10.
5.
Oh, that's counting. Sorry. That's counting you.
Hey, Carlotta? Well, I will chime that there are 10 minutes remaining in our occupancy of this room, so.
The other thing to that point, I mean, I hate to table everything to the next meeting, is we could, as part of the next meeting, maybe put a letter together with an agenda, you know, as part of the agenda, and just say, this could be an option, and we could vote on it at that next meeting. At least there'd be, you know, we could let ASD know we're moving towards something that way, even if we don't have a formalized process yet. But
That wasn't in an effort to derail the inquiry thing. I just thought it's important to know, like, whatever we do, let's try and be transparent and try to be responsive to people, even if it's not the response they want.
Would you like a group to work on that? To make a letter, like some of us for the
Subcommittee?
subcommittee? Yeah. And then bring that to the next one.
yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Have any volunteers, or do we?
We better get down to work hiring it.
Yeah.
We got work to do.
I would help Dan or whoever the next person is.
Can we still use portion of this time?
Would Dan have capacity?
Yeah.
Portion.
Yeah,
There's just
done.
less and less time in the world.
Okay.
I can't commit to meetings, but I would assist in drafting if we can do this like via an email or
Mhm.
shared doc or something. I mean, I have thoughts about it, obviously.
You don't say.
A few.
Or you might have access to some of the data that we picked up that we place in.
Veronica, could we do that via?
If it can be like an electronic meeting thing with no meetings.
Yeah.
Sorry, not electronic document thing with no meetings.
Yes, got it,
No
yes.
meeting.
Yeah.
This just needs to be an email. Hey, Carlotta, do you want to jump back on our meeting so we have a quorum for something?
Oh, absolutely. I just got done with my meeting, so.
She's probably like sitting in her hotel room having a beer or something.
Do you want me to email you something right now?
Please do so. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
The holiday. Okay, can I call you in just a few minutes? Okay, thank you. Bye. Okay, I'm back, sorry, we just have members coming to town and checking in hotels and just making sure everything's all right.
One of the worst things of Carrie coming to work for us is there's nobody to ride herd on Carlotta anymore.
Is she coming back, did I miss something?
I sent her the meeting link again.
Okay.
Text my wife that the meeting we're supposed to attend at 5 has been canceled.
Oh.
So now I've relaxed the last 15 minutes.
So I went to that Medora Cowboy Christmas thing and stopped by the place where they have like the plans for the library and all of that. And like visited with them, and they said they're doing like some big celebration on 4th of July when it opens.
Yeah, the.
That sounds super cool. I'm talking to you all because I thought you were on that committee?
I was for like
Okay.
a year. I'm no longer.
Oh, okay. Maybe you don't hear about this. I was like, oh, you'll know
No,
about
no,
this.
I care about it.
Oh,
It's had many iterations. It's been interesting.
gotcha.
I got to bring the Waltons into the situation. That was interesting with his boss.
What about you, Ryan? What do you know about it?
Yeah, the 250th anniversary or birthday of the United States in 2026, that's the opening date, that's the goal. And they want to have, it's actually part of the official committee. The US has a national committee, and this will be one of the official events to celebrate that.
Oh,
Wow,
that's cool.
He remains.
good
one
for
of-
Medora.
Yeah, and he remains one of the most popular presidents. Like, I mean, you know, I don't know if it's just because he's on Rushmore, but I mean, you know, like, those are the top four. And he's
Maybe
like,
that's why we were fixated on the blues.
right, yeah.
Prolific writer and a prolific leader. He's consumed with
Well, and it's interesting, like, I mean, just bipartisan support, so, you know, the goal is to have a, you know, they're making it, I don't know how much of it you saw, Veronica, but they can host, the hope is to host presidential debates even out there. The problem with that, of course, is airports and watching, but it will be set up for that at least.
I think it'll gravitate to where a lot of leadership conventions are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's a connection all the way down through Rapid City that you can have a tour.
I do have to go away.
Hello?
Rushmore and
Hey,
Carla.
Carlotta.
why would it be?
Okay, gentlemen,
All
we
right,
have our quorum.
so we need a motion for,
This is Veronica. I would like to make a motion that the Olmstead Commission provide a formal written response in our previous inquiry from the Autism Task Force.
we have a second?
This is Scott. I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thanks, Carlotta, for
Thank you.
giving us a forum.
And do we want to
Oh, I'm so,
take a motion for establishing formalizing the inquiry process based off the guidelines that we had today? Or is that, do we need a motion for that, do you think? Or we would just, maybe we need a motion at the next meeting once we've got something more.
I feel like we need something written. Be
Yep.
easier.
Prepared to present.
And then we can vote on it. And we'll connect on that letter.
Do we have a working group for the ASD letter or subcommittee is you two? All right.
Not meeting.
No meetings, just writing.
Just an email chain.
Put a skeleton together and we'll fill it in. How about
Yeah.
that?
All right, thank you, Carlotta.
Thank you, Carlotta.
yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. I think we've exhausted the agenda.
Yeah.
You've
Adjourn.
exhausted the
What about a
members.
motion?
Yeah, it's early. I'm told we don't need a motion.
Okay.
to
Oh.
adjourn. You can adjourn without a motion to adjourn. We will adjourn.
Okay, there you go, you just call it. Thanks.
Bye,
So long,
everybody.
good night, farewell.
Thanks, Scott.
Goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Pretty well, we had starting pictures or late pictures.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't know.
I don't know if I got too wordy or not.
You kind of did.
I know,
Just, so I rearranged
apart,
things and
don't
added
care.
stuff in, so
Yeah.
have a,
7
if
o'clock.
you don't like
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
let me know.
Yeah, I figured I was kind of feeling that, and I was like, whatever. she
Hey,
can-
take some cupcakes for your kids or your husband or yourself.
Oh, I
Or
will.
someone not in this room.
They
A lot of cupcakes.